There is no bigger industry on our planet than food and agriculture. In recent years, ag-tech innovators have created exciting new ways to harness the power of technology to enhance the world's food supply. Ag-tech innovations are protecting crops and maximizing outputs, enabling structural changes in the agriculture system that could achieve important sustainability goals. Listen to top investors and founders from the Agrifood tech and get an insight in the super prosperous industry.
And there you saw it. We had a quick intro, and now what's going to happen is we're going to have two speakers. Both are going to be talking for about 25 minutes, and then you get the chance to jump in with your questions. As always, pump them in the comments, and we shall be asking them. And our next speaker is the managing partner of Rockstart's Agrifood Fund, which is quite challenging to say as a moderator, but I kind of managed. His name is Mark Durno. Before you meet Mark, let's roll the little intro we have prepared for him. And there he is, Mark Durno of Rockstart. Mark, you well?
I'm well, thank you. Yes, yeah. Sorry to disappoint the viewers by not looking quite so glam as on that intro video, but thank you for having me here today.
No worries. You look just as good, brother.
Yeah.
Stage is yours from now on, so enjoy yourself.
Thank you very much. Thanks. And also thank you, Podim, for inviting me to talk today. So my name is Mark Durno. I'm the managing partner at Rockstart Agrifood, which is a bit of a tongue twister if you're not used to saying it, of course. I'm currently calling in from the Netherlands. I normally split my time between here and Denmark, and I'm currently sitting in a very depersonalized living room at the moment. So at least you get a little insight into where I am. In this presentation, I'm going to take you through a quick introduction of Rockstart, who we are and what we're trying to achieve. I'll talk about our investment thesis here at Rockstart Agrifood and what kind of themes we're looking at and seeing. And then I'll share 4 investment cases of portfolio companies that we've invested in over the last 12 months, just to give you some insights into the type of companies that are out there and some of the trends that we're seeing. And of course, I hope anybody who has questions or comments will speak up, because the most fun part about doing these presentations is the interaction and the discussion at the end. So please do interact and ask questions. So starting, I think, from the Rockstart perspective, what we're trying to achieve is addressing some of the global trends that we see in the world. Population growth, aging population, climate change and carbon footprint. These are all issues that are coming up time and time again. I'm not even going to go into the statistics, because I'm sure you've heard how many people we're going to be by 2050, and you've heard about the amount of CO2 we need to reduce by the same kind of time. But it informs our overall investment thesis at Rockstart. So we're focusing on agri-food, health, and energy as our core themes that we try to help disrupt in a positive way. And they are supported, these domain programs are supported by general emerging tech. Sorry, I just had a comment over the top. No. General emerging tech theme. So ultimately what we're looking for are early stage companies with emerging technologies and new business models that are going to drive positive, disruptive change in these very traditional industries of agri-food, health, and energy. Sorry. The way that we do that is by building ecosystems around the domains. So we see that a higher number of startups are successful if you've got the right connections, the right people, the right industry contacts, and indeed the right pathways towards capital and market in order to speed up and accelerate your business. We're doing that through access to capital with our fund, market through corporate partnerships that we run, and through access to customers. Expertise through our mentorship and community. What used to be very much a live thing, we would run 70 to 100 events per year. We're now doing, of course, virtually. And this is what it looks like in numbers. I won't spend a lot of time going through this, but ultimately we run our programs in order to create these access points for the startups that we're investing in. Based out of Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Bogota, these are our core geographies that we work from. But as you'll see later in the presentation, our agri-food industry is global. And as a result, of course, we also scout startups and try and help startups internationally. In saying that, we've got 202 startups in the portfolio just now, over 42 countries in total, to give you an idea. These investments have been made over the last 10 years. So our oldest portfolio companies are about 10 years old now. But that's Rockstart as a whole. Today, I want to talk specifically about agri-food and our mission, which is to invest, supporting and empower the greatest startups to drive positive change. So there is an impact element to what we're dealing with here today. Going back to those global trends and talking about disrupting specifically the agri-food industry, we can look towards population growth again. As it was mentioned in the introduction, we're hurtling towards 10 billion people, maybe even beyond that by 2050. And that's going to be a lot of hungry mouths to feed at a time when land availability is decreasing. There's increased pressure on the amount of food we need to produce on a hectare, and there are less hectares to do it as we have urban sprawl. And then there's all of the impact that we're having right now in terms of climate change and our carbon footprint. Specifically the strain on the energy industry as a result of food production, processing, and distribution. To put some numbers around that and give you an indication, we've got about a 56% increase in food demand by 2050. That's 7.4 trillion more calories than we're producing today if we're going to be able to feed the growing population. We're also going to need a huge amount more land mass to produce food. If we're going to be able to feed all those mouths with our current food production system, we need around about 2 times the size of India to be able to facilitate that kind of demand. And it's forecast that we're going to have a 40% increase in energy if we're going to be able to continue feeding all of these hungry people. Now, these numbers might seem rather arbitrary, or they might leave you cold, as statistics usually do leave me cold. But the thing that really spurred me to action is learning that this is with our current curve trajectory. So that means all of the productivity gains that we've had over the last 100 years on that trajectory and that curve, if you can imagine that we continue to keep up with the pace of projected technology development and projected yield increase, then we're still going to face these barriers. These barriers are also opportunities, and they're referred to in a very comprehensive and logical report by the World Resource Institute as the food gap, the land gap, and the greenhouse gas gap. And when we talk about these gaps, I think it's worth considering the greenhouse gas gap in particular. We're forecasting 21 gigatons more CO2 being released into the atmosphere over the next 30 years. And agriculture and food is responsible for 15 of the 21 gigatons. That's completely disproportionate to the percentage GDP value allocation that agriculture and food actually brings on a global sense, which is only 2%. So if we're going to be able to close this gap, agri and food as an industry is going to come under extreme scrutiny and extreme pressure to be able to meet our climate targets in the next 20 years. So how do we come in and do that? And what kind of investment themes are we looking at to try and help startups drive that positive change? The starting point for Rockstart Agri-Food is to look at the food industry holistically. We need to move away from a fragmented food supply chain towards a more holistic food supply system. And we're only going to do that if we look at this as a system and not as individual niches within a segmented chain. That is a massive task. This is the largest industry on the planet. So we need to compartmentalize it somewhat to see where we can put our energy and impact. So we do that in 3 core themes that these are challenges that can be found across the food supply system. First is around optimization of processes and practices. So how do we make things more efficient? How do we ensure that different stakeholders are connected across the value chain and are actually communicating in order to improve efficiency and reduce any sort of losses? Second one, segueing from there, is stopping food waste. And that also goes to reducing food loss, which are 2 different things. So how can we recycle, upcycle, or indeed just reduce the losses that we have in the first and the last mile? And lastly is around driving sustainability and transparency. And we're really looking at this from the consumer's perspective. So how is it that you can be sure that the product that you're buying is trustworthy, is coming from sustainable sources, has got the right kind of nutrition for you, is impacting your gut health properly. These are all health questions as well that need to be addressed. And we look at the impact that these startups are making through the filter of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So the companies that we work with should be contributing to some of these goals. So a few examples of what I mean by that for anybody who's new to the food industry. Agri-food is not just about tractors and food processing and packaging. There is much more to it. And many of the budding tech entrepreneurs who are out there using very well tried and tested technologies like SaaS models, for example, platforms, marketplaces, indeed AI and machine learning will play a huge role. Those technologies can be applied to the food industry just as well as any other and will have dramatic impact. So on optimization of processes and practices, we're talking about data capture, we're talking about tools to enable automation at the farm, soil health and regeneration of our soils. As the skin of the planet, the soil is probably the largest carbon capture tool that we have. So we want to optimize that. On food waste, I mentioned a few of them already, and then on driving sustainability and transparency, it's really around the consumer and how they link into the rest of the food value chain. So I'll move on to give you a few examples of our portfolio companies that we're working with. So you've got some tangible examples of technologies and startups in this space. This is an overview of the entire portfolio so far. We've got 10 companies in the portfolio just now, which will be expanding to another 10 next month, actually. More on that later. And as you can see, there's a spread between the different themes. Some of them indeed are touching all three of the challenges. The first example I want to use is a company called Nordetect. Nordetect is basically a chemical analysis company. They are using lab on a chip technology. So if you imagine when you're doing a soil test and you're a farmer, you want to check the health of your soil, you need to check a few key parameters. Most notably NPK, for those of you who know what that means. And for those of you who don't, that's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. These are key elements within the soil that promote plant growth and soil health. So they impact yield and also nutritional content for the product that you're growing. Currently, farmers, and I know this because I'm an ex-farmer myself, farmers take a sample of their soil and they send it to a wet lab and they pay to have that soil tested. And then that informs them how many chemicals or indeed organic fertilizers they should put on the soil to enhance the productivity. That process takes about 2 weeks and costs anywhere upwards of €100 per test in order to have wet lab quality testing. So what Nordetect have done is they've minimized the process down onto a disposable chip around about the size of a pen like this, fits in your pocket. And you can take the test sample in the field with their portable device. And then you get a GPS tracked link as to what the NPK soil test readings are in 15 to 60 minutes at a cost of under €10 per sample. So the reason this is interesting for us, and we think it's a very important innovation going forwards, is because it makes soil testing and analysis much more accessible. The disruption is not the product here. The disruption is the amount of time it takes and the complexity in order to do soil testing. And we hope and believe that Nordetect are producing a product that will potentially become a commodity item in the future, so that smallholders the world over will also be able to get the same kind of quantifiable insights into their soil health, which will improve yield and nutrition of their products. So super cool company. We actually just closed a bridge round with them a couple of months back. So they're going further into the R&D to expand out their NPK testing into more variables. The next company I want to give a bit of an overview for and hopefully provide some inspiration to others out there is focused around stopping food waste, actually. And The company is called Beyond Leather Materials, as you can hopefully see on the screen. I'm not sure because I can't see myself, but hopefully you can. What Beyond Leather Materials are doing are taking apple pulp from the cider industry and upcycling that apple pulp into a sustainable leather textile. So it's just like leather, but it's made from apple pulp. This is really interesting because a huge percentage of the apples that are used for pulping and for juices actually just goes to waste. At best, they're used as a component within composting. So the fact that you can take that apple, and the active ingredient is pectin, and upgrade it into a high-end textile is interesting on two levels. One is it reduces the amount of CO2 that's coming out of the waste product from as a byproduct from one industry. And the second thing is that it actually provides a more sustainable alternative to the fashion industry. The fashion industry, although it's not our main goal here, of course, are responsible for around about 10% of current CO2 emissions, depending which report you use. And the question which many vegans have been asking for a long time, and I'm sure many more are now asking post-COVID-19, is why should we strip the skin from a cow to make leather when we can use waste fruit that is a byproduct of an industry? So really exciting product. This is going to be used for automobiles, but also fashion and shoes in the future. And we actually just closed a round with Beyond Leather Materials last week. So congratulations to them. The next company I want to give as an example is much more on the digital front. So basically this is around the consumer. One of the things that we've seen post-COVID-19 is a massive jump in e-commerce. So e-commerce in North America in particular is reportedly jumped from 16% market share to 27% market share in the space of 8 weeks. Now, to give you some perspective, in 2005, it was 5% market share. So we've seen a phenomenal jump, which is just classic. You know, nothing happens and then it all happens at once. Meals are, what they're doing is they have an algorithm to help consumers select nutritious and sustainable products online. So they provide this as a B2B service to retailers. They can do it as an add-on to the online proposition towards their customers. And then when you get to select, for example, a high sugar content item, it might nudge you towards something that's a little bit better for your health. You set the parameters yourself, and currently they're targeted on trials with seniors, in particular seniors who have got calcium deficiency. So they've been able to show a marked improvement on the health of those seniors, and also a sports company in Germany who have got subscriptions for people looking to move towards a more nutritious diet. And now with COVID-19, Marcus, who I'll be talking to later on a panel, actually, I would encourage you to join us. He reported that their 4-year forecast in terms of what was going to happen on the online retail space happened in 8 weeks. So they've sped up the onboarding of a couple of retailers for that. So quite exciting. The last one I'll give an example of in the portfolio is a company called Rawhannel. And Rawhannel, at the core of what they do is they're trying to enable artisanal and smallholder producers. So these are the local farmers who are producing a niche or a very high quality product. It can be anything from a fresh produce through to something that's brewed like beer or processed like chocolate. And they're trying to create access for those small businesses. The reason they do that is because they see that it's difficult for those businesses to get to market, because actually the food industry is not agile. If you look at what the impact of COVID-19 has shown us, it's that if most of our food supply is based around clunky industrial processes that are really difficult to maneuver if there's a change in consumer behavior. So Rawhannel are trying to create an access way for these smallholder producers to find customers, the consumer, and they're doing that by providing a solution to help retailers to gain access to the products. So they have a platform. It's a SaaS model that the retailer can basically, each individual store manager can go in and make orders from the individual smallholder farmers, and then Rawhannel facilitates the delivery of those orders to the stores. This is working so well that they've got a collaboration with Coop in Denmark, Coop Supermarket. And actually, they're now seeing the first retail contracts that were agreed outside of the platform being brought onto the platform, because with technology, they're far more efficient in terms of the logistics and delivery. So a lot to take in, I think, in terms of opportunities and sheer opportunity size of the agri-food market here. I wanted to give a couple of insights into our current application process, just to let people see what's coming. This is real-time information, so I just downloaded this last night. And then I'll go on to say a final word about the industry before opening up for Q&A. So some insights. We had our applications for our next batch of investments have been open for the last couple of months. They closed about 3 weeks ago. We are still entertaining conversations with startups. So if you're an agri-tech or a food tech startup, call me. This is to give you a bit of an idea of where we see the action happening for our fund. The numbers speak for themselves, but I think interestingly is Southeast Asia. There's a lot happening there in terms of digital transformation. We see the same also in the Indian continent. Indeed, we've invested in 2 Indian agri-tech startups because the challenges that are being faced across the fragmented supply chain there are just huge. And emerging technologies simple technologies like platforms and marketplaces can really help to accelerate that change. I also wanted to give you a bit of an insight into where or what the applicants are actually working on. So as I said, a lot of businesses working on agribusiness marketplaces just now, many of them in Southeast Asia and in Africa where it's quite fragmented. So they're looking to try and replace wholesalers. Interestingly, what we see is that the really tough ones are around quantifiable consumer. That's a difficult segment. Home cooking tech, I think it's a little bit early for consumers to be moving towards robot kitchens. And we also see quite a lot in the pipeline in terms of farm management systems, software and IoT. So there's probably in the coming couple of years going to be a bit of a consolidation around the marketplaces and also around a lot of these farm management platforms that have been running for a few years now, as we see some of the bigger players coming in and starting to activate their M&A activities. That's actually good for the industry because it's going to give us a lot more exit reference cases so that hopefully agri-tech and food tech becomes a more recognized opportunity to the wider technology investment community. So, not to be pessimistic, but 90% of all startups fail. And there's a bit of a gap in the market when it comes to agri-food investing. So, like many components of tech investing, it's easy to get early stage support. It's super easy to get later stage support once you've got some growth metrics. If you've got the right growth metrics, you'll have funds and finance opportunities fighting to be involved. The hard bit is in the middle, and especially for having started and scaled an agri-tech company myself, the hardest bit was tying together domain-focused smart VC across the pre-seed up to the growth stage. So that's where we want to come in. And maybe just to round off, we believe agri-food as a theme is a massive opportunity. If you are a tech entrepreneur or an investor, definitely look more closely into this. We've seen a massive ramp up in terms of VC investment over the last years. And normally I would round off by saying something along the lines of, round sizes are increasing. Actually, on the panel, we'll have Insect speaking later on about their company. Exits are increasing, and the fact that we've had this breakout year, and then in 2018, this happened, and there was this huge IPO for Beyond Meat, who are producing a plant-based alternative to meat. That's normally where I would finish on the good news part, but here, I mean, we don't know. COVID-19 is the new normal, apparently. So we're still trying to find our feet, what the impact is going to be on the industry. We only know that it's a huge opportunity to change the way we do things. And hopefully we can consider how we would like to build our food supply system as if we were to start from scratch so that we can be more efficient and more sustainable in that sense. So I've been Mark. I'm happy to take any questions or have any discussions that you may like to have. And thank you very much for your attention.
Mark, thank you very much for that. And before we get to the audience questions, which are still coming in, I'm curious because you ended up with Beyond Meat. And I bought a couple of stocks in them like several months ago, just out of interest because I kind of followed that topic. And what I found so intriguing was they've been going down ever since, not ever since I bought stocks, but and then suddenly, more or less in parallel, when the whole COVID-19 thing started, it seems that their stock is picking up. Do you think that COVID-19 is going to accelerate the adoption of, let's call it, alternative food solutions?
It's certainly a thesis that many of the alternative food solution CEOs and companies would subscribe to, and is a very useful tool for the discussion. I think there are, actually, Ali Morrow, who's the next speaker after we've been talking about this a few times about the ping pong of that argument that you see over social media. You've got the one side saying that plant-based is the future and nobody's ever going to trust livestock and meat production again. You've got another side who are saying that nothing's actually changed, and if anything, people are doing more barbecues at home, so they're buying more burgers. I think for me, the truth is somewhere in the middle. We're going to see, especially in Western markets, a move towards plant-based alternatives. Overall, in the next 20 years, we will see a move towards the protein transition purely out of necessity, because it's not sustainable to continue to farm animals and livestock the way that we do. And I think COVID is an accelerating point on the conversation, but it's not going to be the thing that pushes regulation or pushes something to really enforce that we have plant-based diets.
So I think I like the outlook you gave right now. And for me, I think the adoption of this market still seems a very emotional discussion, right? There's people who have different beliefs clashing each other. And because of these beliefs, they're not really happy to give the whole thing a fair chance. At what point in time do you think are these beliefs going to end and people just looking at it with rationale and going like, look, this makes a lot more sense than this and this option?
This is my personal opinion on it. That will never end because food is culture. Food is culture. People are connected. It's what you eat. It's what you consume, and it's entirely connected to who you want to be as an individual in this world. So the changes, the big kind of, if you like, societal shifts will happen generation by generation. And as generations go, it gets faster. We see that with millennials, and then the next one's coming through. They almost run kind of like an exponential growth in terms of like a tech chart. But it will always be cultural, and there will always be differences as a result of that that need to be taken into account.
Now, I'm a huge car guy. And obviously the famous T model, that was like the pivotal moment, the point where suddenly we had a product that made sense to a broad audience. How far are we from this T model in these industries?
In respect of alternative proteins specifically, or across the board?
I'd say let's make it simple. Let's say across the board. I know there's a lot of different industries we're talking, but let's say if we were to say this entire like food tech industry, are we 5 years away from a T model? Are we 10 years away? Is something like Beyond Meat already the T model? I don't think so, but
yeah, I mean, you could say that though. I mean, if I'm looking at where I would place my bets right now, it would be that within the next 10 years, we've got a much bigger chunk segment of the market on more sustainable solutions. So that could be for plant-based alternative proteins, but it could also be in terms of how we engage with technology. That will be the norm. I probably wouldn't be staking my bets on technologies that speed up or enhance livestock production, which is already stretched to its limits. That's kind of like investing in a hybrid car instead of going straight to electric as a solution.
I'm very curious what the future brings. Unfortunately, the time is up at this point. Mark, it's been a pleasure meeting you in this quite peculiar setting, but which is also the future. So that was a nice look into the future. Thank you very much for joining in. Stay safe, and I hope to speak to you in person sometime in the near future. Stay safe, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Now, we're going to stay in this field and have our second keynote. And as again, it's going to be about 25 minutes and then your questions if you feel like putting them into the comments section. And our next speaker is called Ali Morrow, and she's a principal at Astanor Ventures, and the slogan is "Where Tech Meets Nature." That sounds quite promising, but let's first roll our intro. And there you are. Hello, Ali. How are you? You'll have to unmute, I guess. You're still on mute.
Okay.
We've got you. There you go. How are you, Ali?
Hi. I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm very well. Very much looking forward to your keynote, and our stage is yours.
Thank you. And can you see my screen okay? I can't tell.
Currently, we've still got you, so now it's looking better.
Yeah? Okay, great. All right. I will start here. So just from a context setting standpoint, I'll start with a statement that I think summarizes the challenge and opportunity that surely was true pre-COVID, but has become all the clearer since the lockdown and otherwise kicked off in the past few months, and the slightly alternate reality that we've all been living has become everyday life, and is most potent and clear within the food sector. And so that comment comes from Mark Carney, which is, Amazon is one of the most valuable companies in the world, yet the Amazon region appears on no ledger until it's stripped of its foliage and converted to farmland. The price of everything is becoming the value of everything. This crisis could help to reverse that relationship so that public values help to shape private values. The great test of whether this shift will prevail is climate change. I think, as I said, COVID has put a spotlight on the major weaknesses in how we structure as a global society, and it's clarified that we are indeed a global society. For better or worse, border or no border, airborne viruses tend not to discriminate, so we've learned. This has put a spotlight on industrialization and outsourcing and capitalism's incentives. Cheap, large quantity production may provide greater access in one part of the world to a given good, say soy, but the structure of that supply chain and fragility inherently built into it can't be avoided and are no longer out of sight and out of mind. We are now living the costs of a food system that incentivizes quality over quantity. And we've seen this. Mark presented any number of these stats, but I'll go through our iteration of something similar. Which is to say, in terms of health, many of these stats have been repeated, and I think most people know them quite well now, but foodborne illness is crippling the healthcare system. 30% of the world is obese or overweight, while 1 in 9 are hungry. Annual treatment costs are skyrocketing. Obesity is somewhere between 2 trillion and then slightly above that in terms of global costs, and malnutrition in and of itself is 3.5 trillion. Pandemic risks for antibiotic resistance is increasing, and that was a stat, again, true long before COVID. As it stands, intensive farming conditions require animals to be fed 80% of available antibiotics. Climate, 1/3 of the Earth's soil has been acutely degraded, as Mark mentioned. Soil fertility is a primary consideration. The reason for that is soil fertility is being lost at 24 billion tons a year as demand for food increases. Agriculture generates 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions. Animal agriculture alone is responsible for 18%, which is more than all of the exhaust from transportation combined. 70% of the world's freshwater resources are consumed by agriculture alone. And that's a reasonably old stat from the World Bank, so not getting much better. Food security, crop yields have flatlined, which is in part exacerbated by desertification being on the rise. 40% of food processed and produced goes to waste because it doesn't make it to market on time. You have perishability issues, you don't have cold chains, and then of course storage conditions and consumer waste are tremendous. While we also know that the nutritional quality of foods have different timelines and are impacted by how they're grown for sure, but also their route to market and storage conditions, and vary by variety. Interestingly, an apple loses its nutrients over the course of 7 weeks post-harvest, while spinach and leafy greens lose theirs within 7 days.
Ali.
That, I think, is an interesting point to recognize for the sake of it. It changes our view. Or
Dear Ali.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to jump in, but could you please start your presentation? We have a bit of issues. You're going to have to share your screen and start the presentation.
Is it working now?
Let's see if it's working now. It does seem to look better now. Let's see on the screen. Let's see what the studio says. For me, it seems to be working. I guess it is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Please.
No problem. I can't see your side. I'll keep going. Except, there we go. Okay. So a great deal of negatives, as I think we've been through so far on this. What's great about this is it offers an opportunity. So it's a great place to be to recognize all of those ills and particularly have the opportunity for new technology to come in and play a role. Where we see this is that it's clear that there's codependence between nations and the natural resources they control, and ultimately we are dependent on nature, not separate from it. Once you establish that, stewardship of natural capital ought to be seen differently. It ought to be seen as the canvas on which we thrive and decline as a species. Nature is something to protect and regenerate versus mine to depletion. Resilience and connection between natural resources and people is now more in the spotlight than ever. And as I was just saying, I mean, it presents a tremendous opportunity for new technology to address systemic issues, starting from a place of asking why and answering with vision and science-backed solutions. Now more than ever, we ought to build commercial value on this basis. So I'll go through Astanor's investment thesis, and you've got our top line on the screen now, I think. And what that has meant so far as the themes we consider most important going forward and where we placed investments to date. So just make sure that works. Right, so this was our investment thesis long before COVID and has certainly been true now. I think we've seen certain priorities become more pronounced, but again, was true before COVID, and the systemic problems in food again, have been exacerbating for decades, if not longer. So we built our investment thesis by taking nature as our guide. As we say, we are where nature meets technology. Nature is inherently all of the following. It's waste-free, it is circular, it is regenerative, it selects for health and resilience. It is an ecosystem of which we are only one part, and we can and should trust, but we need to understand how that works in order to do that. The latter is where the tenets of regenerative agriculture come in. And new technologies that are adding efficacy of science to create transparency and traceability across the food system. So we talk about investing and do invest from soil to gut. So from our slide, which hopefully you see, is accelerating regenerative agriculture through to innovations and fortification of food production models, or we talk about it from soil to gut and the connected value chain that sits in the middle of that. Again, this was our thesis before COVID and will certainly be true after. All that's changed is the degree to which this thesis is more personal and more shared by a greater number of people than ever before. From an opportunity standpoint, again, I'll leverage somebody else's comments just to make the point, which is Gary Hamel from the London Business School, recently described the shift from the shift between what happens in a large crisis to a smaller crisis. And so as he put it, in a small crisis, power moves to the center, but in a large one, it moves to the periphery. COVID's put a spotlight on our food system and brought new priority to its resilience, trustworthiness, and health outcomes, or lack thereof. This has become obvious in our reaction. So I think there are four themes that have come out of that, and that we certainly are looking at now and reflect some of our portfolio, most of our portfolio. And those are these, and they cross-pollinate between one another. So locally grown, locally consumed, we are seeing more of an interest in decentralized food systems. Density and purchasing power are driving a shift toward distributed supply chains closer to the points of consumption. More simply put, we want food where we live. We want to grow and consume in the same place. And we're being more innovative in how that's delivered than ever. Quality quantified. So the concept of digitization in the food system is not a new one. That's long been the story, and that's arguably where I think Mark said as well, the concept of creating a better tractor or on-farm technology exclusively, those are important things, and connecting the data that we get on farm to having better insights so we farm differently and are more attentive to environmental conditions. This has been a conversation for quite some time, but how we provide quality metrics and put measurements to the quality of food and how that connects back to environmental health and human health, that's a newer space, and one that absolutely is burgeoning. We want proof, we want data-driven trust. And trust in the food system, of course, is where most of this originates from. It's the origin of why food safety became so important to us as humans for survival reasons. And of course, now is evolving into a place of how does that relate to my personal welfare, my personal health, and more broadly, my environment. Connected to that, food is medicine. The gut and the microbiome is becoming ever more defended as an area where we are seeing science-backed insight on how that connects to our overall mental health and physical health, and how the foods contribute to that. How can we track the data from our gut in order to discern what we can and should be eating, and then how do we produce food differently that magnifies and helps that. And then what we're seeing is nature's kitchen. So here, this is everything from protein transition to how we inculcate and contain and bring to bear all of the best properties of living organisms to aid and abate human health as well as the broader environment. For us, the latter two are really underpinned by a fundamental ancient core technology that nature and humanity has been leveraging ever since we started to cook, which is fermentation, and how we turn plants and other flora and fauna into things that can provide us both calories, but also nutrients and allow us to thrive. And of course, define our cultures through the food and traditions that we've used to do that for millennia. So I will go through at a top line some of the companies that we have the benefit to work with. And I'm hoping that you can still see my screen. Tell me if not. So one of those is La Ruche Kidiwi, which is an online farmers market. They are born and bred in France, but have scaled across many countries in Europe. What's fascinating about them is, as has been true since their beginning, they bring ultra fresh food to consumers, and they inherently are all about creating trust between people and food by virtue of putting a face on that. And that face is a farmer that people can know and feel a sense of community connected to. Since COVID, they've seen a 300% increase in sales. More impressively, they've been able to deliver on that scale, both from a supply side and ability to address demand, which is testament to the team, but also the high quality food system in Europe that they're able to participate in and add benefit to. And I'll just add on that one. I mean, I think one thing that we certainly believe and has been true so far is that demand is unlikely to go away. Two reasons for that. One, there's much conversation around habit forming and how long it takes to form a habit, and that most people in COVID and in lockdown will have formed any number of habits, and those will be cemented by now. So I think part of it is that as to whether or not people have created a consumer relationship with La Ruche, they'll be unlikely to remove from that. But more importantly, creating trust within the food system. Why would anyone walk away from that at this point? I think that's become more important than anything. On the other side of the coin, in-farm, which speaks more to connected value chain and being able to have healthy food that you can trust in a local environment. In-farm has been a brilliant example of that and leader in Europe. They began in Berlin and scaled across Germany and are now in France and in the UK and entering more countries by the day. They're a testament to the fact that the nutritional value of leafy greens and herbs atrophies really, really quickly, as we said, at most 7 days before you lose the nutritional density in leafy greens and herbs. There could be no more important food product that we consume where having it as close to harvest as possible is that. They built a brand around that. They built a community around that perspective and done a brilliant job in doing that. They've also created carbon neutrality and emission neutrality in their production system. Quality quantified. So this one is Teak Origin. They are Boston based. And if you look at the image on the right, this is their team in lockdown with their spectral imaging devices in their homes. And what they've done, as they were doing before, they were sampling foods in order to discern everything from the vitamin C levels to antioxidant levels of different foods and create the world's largest data set of that kind of data so that we can actually use more than our eye or proxies like certification schemes to discern the value of a food. and be able to source accordingly. But doing this, taking the lab home and doing that over the course of time, where you have foods that you're storing in your home and people are cooking more at home, they have more actual fresh raw produce at home, using their technology to speak to what nutritional value those foods have. What will be interesting, and they're an early stage company and they're learning as they go, and they're learning out loud so far as if you follow them on their Medium blogs, they're reporting on what they're learning on a daily basis and being really transparent about that, which is really interesting to watch, and it gives people the ability to be part of a living lab, even during this time. But with that, it'll unearth conversations around, does it matter how food was grown? Does it matter how food was transported? Does that change its nutritional value over time? What matters most? Can we put weighting on priorities on that? And can we have a commercial system that remunerates that in terms of how we pay for food? So interesting times ahead for them. And this is their lab at home work, so do look them up. It's fascinating times and very much real time. Food is medicine. This mentioned before. Gut health. Anna and Lisa are forces of nature who are based in London, and they are making the microbiome revolution accessible to everyone. What they have done in a way that a few others, the prebiotic and probiotic area, for anyone, whole food shopper, or Planet Organic shopper, or any number of other higher end niche grocery store shoppers will know that acidophilus and a range of other niche products have been available for a very long time. Those haven't necessarily taken off. Why is that? Part of the reason is education around the role of microbiome, as well as connection between overall diet and one's gut and overall health. And I think Alana and Lisa have done a brilliant job of making that accessible and creating an education platform to translate that information. And now we're creating a product, a range of products that will start with fiber, and again, create accessible products that can fit within daily routine to enable better gut health, along with the education that really brings consumers along for the journey. Too fast. Nature's Kitchen, and we'll talk more about this to follow. And as Mark mentioned before, we have the benefit of both Insect, NoQuo, and Rebel Meats, who will talk to us very soon on the protein piece, as well as how to leverage nature's best ingredients to create food products. We'll start with Insect, who some people might have heard of. They are French. They are farming Molitor, which is a mealworm, at scale in order to create an alternative protein source for the aquaculture market. Changing that feed source has tremendous impact. As you probably know, most aquaculture, as in large salmon and sea bass farms, are fed off of the harvest of wild anchovy stocks, which requires depleting the ocean of wild stocks in tremendous quantity, as well as, of course, shipping those to different parts of the world where you have large-scale aquaculture operations. It is not a net positive way of operating, and the environmental impacts are tremendous. In order to change that, we believe that feeding feed differently is a really interesting area and has tremendous benefits. Insect is an example and perfect one of that, of doing this with execution and scale. To that end, Antoine, who's the CEO, and Alain, who you'll hear from shortly on the panel, have been building a massive team, as you can now see on the top of that slide, who are bringing that intelligence to the aquaculture market and pet food market as well. And finally, NoQuo. This is, I think, where it gets into some of the Astanor DNA that we've not necessarily touched on today, which is really about, why do we care about food? Food absolutely is necessary for our survival. It is part of what enables humans to see another day and populate our species. But really, food is delicious. Food is a cultural element that we prize and we love. It creates traditions that are what we fill our memories with early and throughout our lives, and of course remember later in life, and celebrate. They bring people together. They are what enable us to share love in a really interesting and truly human way. And so bringing together novel innovation and new technology that can translate nature into something that enables that core value of humanity is a core tenet of what we want to achieve within the food sector. And so to that end, NoCo is making plant-based cheese delicious and sustainable. Why cheese? If you've had any of the plant-based cheeses, there's been a lot of advancement in plant-based meats. There's an interesting conversation to be had there, and Rebel Meat, Philip for sure will provide perspective on that to follow. And we were just discussing, or Mark was just discussing Rebel Meats, not Rebel Meats, Beyond and Impossible, and some of the others that have been leaders in this space. They are testament to the fact that there is a market interest here, and that if you give consumers something that meets their needs, those needs being something delicious and something that we can enjoy in the formats that we like, there is absolutely an interest in uptaking new forms of protein. NoCo is doing that against cheese because, frankly, there is no competitor within that space who is delivering those qualities yet. So they aim to do that and to really bring the acumen of some of the best chefs and fermentation experts to bear on that development. So I'll leave it there, in that I think we have a lot more we can discuss on the protein panel related to that, but that's a top line on who we are and some of the values that we aim to invest in agri-food tech.
Very much for those insights, Ali. Now, I'm quite curious about this. We talked about this early on, and I'm curious, how far do you think are we from a mass market adoption, where it's not just like a smaller group of people saying, hey, I'm willing to test this, but where people just consume this as a new normal?
Consume what? Plant-based cheese?
Or let's say any form of non-dairy and non-animal proteins, or alternative proteins, as you call them.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If you look back to, I guess it was 2018, the first conversations were held around the new regulations that would be placed on lab-grown meats. And that was held by the FDA and the USDA. And the point of reference that they went back to was GMO, and whether or not the GMO market entry had been handled appropriately and what could be done to avoid that kind of execution. And that arguably that was a failure. It created a lot of stigmatization around foods, which now has become practically evangelical rhetorical in terms of people's perspectives, which are now really entrenched. I think we're now looking at that so far as bringing new proteins to market. Part of it is how those proteins are communicated and consumer education around them. Are there any risks? Arguably, scientifically, that's where GRAS certifications and other food safety regulations that are placed on food companies entering that space, that's all of the hoops that they jump through. I mean, they can't get to market without that. So food safety, we can argue, is ticked off. I think on the, is there market interest in it? Absolutely. The trend of plant-based diets is definitely increasing. There's more efficacy to that being a form of health. And I think Mark mentioned it prior as well. There is some debate around, has there been an uptick in plant-based foods while there's been a massive decline on meat? How inflated is that number? I don't think we necessarily know that yet. You can see conversations from both sides of the coin. Anyway, suffice to say, I think, yes, there's absolutely appetite for it. There are some protein areas where there's more opportunity and interest. One of those for us is certainly mycelium, and anything within the fungi and mushroom space. Firstly, because it is a natural product in and of itself. So once you're starting from that point, your market entry should be easier, but also consumer adoption, I would think. And then there's a world of positives to talk about in terms of the texture and flavor of mycelium and fungi.
Now tell me, I've been asking this, Mark, as well early on, observing the stock of Beyond Meat. We could see it was kind of going down. And as soon as COVID-19 happened, more or less, it seems that the stock has been going up and up. Have you got the feeling that COVID-19 is impacting this industry in some form, or is there no correlation?
I mean, the Beyond stock is such an imperfect measure because, as you probably noticed, it does play snakes and ladders on a regular basis. I think there are some categories where you can make sense of. For example, I was on a call a little while ago with the founder of Oatly, who had mentioned, his sales have gone absolutely through the roof. That makes sense in large part for the sake of it's shelf stable, as well as there had been a consumer habit formed. I mean, they're a 25-year-old company. They didn't come out of nowhere. They're the sort of the grandfathers of the plant-based space, as well as the function of their product is incredible. It is barista approved. And I think those are the kind of markers, and impossible as well, of do the people who will bring scale to your product love it, and will they be your champions? That was David Chang for Impossible. Oatly had the land of the baristas singing its praise for quite some time. So I think that, proof is in the pudding, literally and figuratively.
Now I'm interested. So I have a podcast. That podcast we sometimes have, not sometimes, we always end with moonshots and predictions. And predictions is quite straightforward. We say within the next period of time, this is something that's going to happen. And the moonshots are something where we say, do you know what, this would be amazing if you'd have to form one prediction and one moonshot. Could be anything. What would that be?
Sorry, this is going to happen and this should happen. Those were the two.
So one is a prediction where you say, I'm quite sure this will happen. And the moonshot is something where you say, look, it's it would be amazing. It's tricky. It'll be hard, but that could just happen.
Yeah. Prediction, so far as I think it is happening and definitely will happen, is creating transparency in our food system so that we can trust the food that we eat. That in terms of localized food systems, short distribution models, all of that's already coming true. Seeing that happen at scale and to fundamentally change where the vast majority of people get their food, not only in the globalized West, but around the world, that I think will come to be true. I think you'll see leapfrog technology in other parts of the world that get ahead of us faster because they have the opportunity to do so. And then on the moonshot side of it, I mean, to have a food system that sequesters more carbon than it uses, that would be incredible.
And I just want to ask one more thing, because I think your answers were very precise and very correct. So I'd be interested. What do you think is holding this moonshot back currently the most?
In literal terms, the way in which we conduct intensive industrial agriculture is the problem. In what will translate that, seemingly two things: data that enables us to defend the fact that carbon is being sequestered when we do X, Y, and Z, and then ability to remunerate that. And you see any number of companies working in this space, or at least conversing in this space. There are a lot of early stage companies in Europe, Carbon Farm. In the US, there are a few of them. Indigo is the one that most people know currently. Soil Capital, Soil Heroes within Europe. Again, these are all early stage companies. Not all. Indigo is not an early stage company, but the vast majority are in the early stages of trying to bring that to fruition. No one has that cracked, but I think that conversation is one that will burgeon, and the data piece is obviously core.
Thank you very much for sharing your valuable insights. Very curious to see how the imminent and near future will play out. Exciting space. Thank you very much for joining us, Ali Morrow. Thank you very much, Ali. Stay safe and goodbye. So now we've talked a lot about agri-food. You've seen there's a lot happening. So sometimes people are saying, hey, I'm looking for opportunity and I just can't find it. But if you want to see a space where a lot is happening, that's something you might want to look into. And if you're given the opportunity to try something, go for it. It's sometimes even better than the original. Don't believe me? Just try it out. Now, before I hand over to the Podim DX studio in Europe, we're going to do one thing we've done quite a few times today, and that's we're going to roll the intro.